and video 50 of the series. For the next few videos, we are going to look at MIDI Effects. This is another set of plugins that you can only insert on instrument channel strips. That means you can't use these plugins with audio tracks. They generate MIDI data. They do not alter the audio file. All MIDI effect plugins can be loaded from the inspector. Also, they are placed before the audio plugins. So if you have an instrument loaded and you have an audio and a MIDI effect plugin, the notes you play will be processed by the MIDI effect plugin first and then by the audio plugin. So let's start with the first one, the Arpeggiator. As I said, everything can be loaded in the inspector. So I can click here and then just select the plugin that I want. For this one though, there is another way to do so in case you are using smart controls. So I will take the Arpeggiator off. I select the instrument that I want, I press B as in Bravo to open the smart settings, and on the upper right corner here, when I click this little icon, it will load the Arpeggiator plugin. And once that is loaded, you can press it again and it will activate or deactivate it. Okay, let's press B again. Let's select this one and loop it or cycle it. And let's start from the beginning. What is an arpeggio? It is a broken chord, a chord that is played one note at a time, so not all together at the same time. Now, any chord you put into this plugin, it will be arpeggiated. And the stock Logic Pro Arpeggiator is one of the best I have seen in all of the DAWs that I have used. So let's see to what I have originally played. So I'm going to take it off. And with the Arpeggiator, so let's look at everything and let's start from the very top. For starters, I'm actually going to make this one, let's go 175. Yeah, that should be fine, because a lot of people are watching these videos from their phones and it makes it a bit easier to see what's going on. So on the upper left corner, we get the play button. This will start or stop arpeggiating the chords. So if I play a chord on my keyboard, or even just one note while it's on, it will arpeggiate it. If it's off, it obviously doesn't. Now next to the play button, we get a very cool function called Capture Live Performance. As you can see, it's not active right now. It is only available once MIDI is passing through the plugin. So if I press play, you will see that it will be available. Now underneath my piano instrument, I have loaded an Alchemy patch. Now this track is empty, it has nothing on it. Now while the piano is playing in the Arpeggiator, I can either grab the original chords or the arpeggiated chords and create MIDI regions with them. So the top icon will create a MIDI region that is exactly the same as the original chord. And the bottom icon will create a MIDI region that is arpeggiated, and the new chords will follow the settings we have set here. So I can have it play back and then add to my Alchemy track. So let's do that while it's playing from the beginning. Well, I missed one. Let's try that again. Now, as you can see, you can only add a chord at the beginning of the bar. And since the setting I have right now is on 16th notes, that will add just 4 16th notes. So if I want to complete the bar, I will have to duplicate the regions. So let's do that. And let's see what we've got. So these are exactly like the chords we had in the original one, and these will be the arpeggiated ones. Now next to that, let's move that here, we get the latch options. This will allow your chord to be arpeggiated without having to hold down a key, and you get different modes for that. So let's start with the first one, which is reset. Now I'm going to change to the keyboard so that you can see what I'm actually playing as well. Now, reset. It resets the chords or the note every time you press a key or keys. So it will arpeggiate every time you press a new key or a chord and then clear the previously played material. So let's do a C7. Let's do a new one. Let's do a G. And to stop it, simply just press on Latch again. So the next one is Transpose. This will transpose the chord that you play when you press a single key. So you play a chord, and then whenever you press a single key, it will transpose to that. So if you play a new chord or a dyad, meaning just 2 notes, then it will reset to that and start arpeggiating that. So let's turn Latch on. And then if I play 2 or more, now the next one is gated transpose. This one is similar, but it will only play back the arpeggiated chord for as long as you hold down the key. So when you lift your finger off the keyboard, it will stop arpeggiating. I will set up the chord that I want to arpeggiate, and it will only play back and transpose for as long as I hold my finger down on the keyboard. So. Now the next one is add. Now this will keep arpeggiating the chord you played, and it will add every new note you play to the arpeggio. If you play a note more than one time, it will take that into consideration. So pay attention to the key that I will press 3 times. It will play it back 3 times in the arpeggio. So let's try that. And the next one is add temporarily. This is similar to the previous one, but it will only add the notes to the arpeggio for as long as you hold them down. So I will establish what the main arpeggio will be, and then it will add the note that I press down for as long as I hold it. So let's turn on Latch. And the very last one is through. This allows you to play on top of the arpeggiated chord. So I will put my chord down, and then I can play the keys on my keyboard without arpeggiating these notes. So let's do an A. Now next to that, we have delete last. That will delete the last note, rest or tie that you had added to the arpeggio. And clear will clear all the notes from the Arpeggiator plugin Latch memory, so it will reset everything to 0. Then all the way down here, we get a hidden menu. So if you click on this little arrow, you get this option, Silent Capture. So when I enable this, the play button will be deactivated and the latch mode will be enabled. So let's actually try that. Now, when I play a note, it will be captured, and then I can press play and it will play back arpeggiated. So let's try that. And when I press play, now the next section of the Arpeggiator is the note order. Rate will let you choose the value of the arpeggiated notes. So let's listen back to the original one. So I'm going to take it off. As you can hear, it's whole notes or semi-breaths if you're from the UK. And the rate allows you to choose at what note value the chord will be arpeggiated. So by default, when you open the plugin, it's at 16th notes. So to set the rate, we've got latch on. To set the rate, I can either use this knob here or simply just click on it and get these options here. So as you can see, we have a lot of options. So let's try 8th notes. So I can't say I necessarily agree with the slow and fast marks on the knob, as the value of the note is tempo related, so sometimes a 16th note might be slower than 8th notes, but I can understand why they put it there. So next to that, we get the Arpeggio Direction Buttons. As the name suggests, we set the direction of the arpeggio. So the first one is up, and that will play from the lowest to the highest note. The next one is down, the opposite of up, that will play from the highest note to the lowest. The next one is up and down, it plays from the lowest to the highest, and then from the highest to the lowest. Let's do 6th notes. The next one is outside in. That plays the highest, then the lowest, then the second highest, then the second lowest, and so on. Random will arpeggiate the notes at a random order. And the last one, as played, it will play the notes as they are triggered. So if I open the piano roll, and let's make this one a touch smaller again, you will see that the chords I played do not fall straight on the grid. It's just how I played them. So in the same chord, some notes come in slightly earlier. So the as played mode will follow that order. So and as you can see, let's go back to, what was it, 175. And as you can see, underneath the as played option, we get this little lock option. So if I enable that, it will lock the note order. So all the new chords will have to follow the order of the locked chord. So if I lock it while it's playing the first one, it will follow those settings. Now next to that, we get the variation options. For that, let's use a more sustained chord. So let's choose that one. Now the variation determines the type of note order variation, and it depends on if it's on octave range or inversions. So there are too many variations to explain what is happening for each one, so I will only explain a few so that you know how they function, and then you can experiment with the rest. So let's start with the octave range first. So when it's set to variation 1 and octave range 1, nothing happens. There is no transposition. Let's actually do up and down. Now, as I raise the octave range, so let's do up, you can see that the same arpeggio is added on the higher octaves. So let's do that. Of course, we can spice it up with variation. So variation 1 will play from the lowest to the highest, as you have seen. Variation 2 will play the first transposed note first, which will be the lowest, and then repeat the arpeggio. So in our case, where we have, let's see what we've got. That's a D7. It will play the D an octave higher, then jump down, play the original D an octave higher, and so on. So let's have a listen. Let's make it slower, if you will. Now, and all of these variations will change depending on the note order that you choose. So the up, down, and outside, or anything that you choose, will have different variations. So you see that you have a lot of options to experiment with. Now let's change it to inversions. As before, variation 1 and inversion 1 will have no effect, but if I put it on inversion 2, then it will play the chord in root position, meaning as it is, and then for the second time it will play it in first inversion, so it will start from the third note of the chord. In our case, since we have a D7, the second time it will start from the note F. And you get the idea, lots of options to have fun with. Now next, let's look at pattern parameters. Now we have two modes for that. We have live and grid. You can't have both on at the same time. When grid is on, it controls the velocity, cycle length, rest, ties, chords, and velocity. It ignores all live input. When live mode is on, then the performance is controlled by your input. For example, how loud you play the keys. That will determine the velocity that the arpeggio will be played back. Between these two modes, there is an arrow. While the arpeggio is playing back in live mode, if I press that arrow, it will capture all the parameters from the live mode and transfer them to the grid. So as it's playing back, and now it has been transferred to the grid, and now I can go ahead and edit that here. But let's start with the live mode. So when I enable Latch, you will see that a few options appear down here. And let's also set it to reset. So rest will add a rest of the current position. Small note here, a rest can only be added while building the arpeggio. So that means that at least one key should be held down if you want to add a rest. Tie will add a tie and connect the two steps, and the chord button will add a chord. The chord that will be played are the held down notes in their unique velocity. So let's actually try it. Let's do just let's just see 7. And now I can let go and it will keep playing, and I can now click on the arrow to transfer to the grid mode. So now it has been transferred to the grid mode, and now I have here essentially like a 16-step sequencer that can go ahead and change all the parameters. Well, the default setting shows you just 16 steps. It can actually go all the way up to 128 steps. So simply grab this little handle here and just extend it. And we go all the way up to 128. So let's go back. Let's do 12. And now let's experiment with it. So I will have to play it back and then just mess around with the settings. That's the velocity. I can add the chord here. It's too much. I can make it more staccato. Just simply grab it. Make it like that. Add a note here. Take the chord off. Add another step. I keep forgetting to take Latch off, and as you can see, you get a lot of options to experiment with and come up with some very interesting patterns. And also, of course, you get presets. So let's actually look at some. Factory presets. I do not know what these are, but let's try them. Of course, you can go ahead and just make your own changes here. As you can see, endless possibilities, and we've got more parameters. So let's explore the Options tab. I leave a pattern playing, so let's do one from these ones. So what's a cool name? Pulsing accents. Yeah, I like that one. So in the Option tab, we can set the global playback parameters. So note length will change the relative length difference between the steps. So if I take it all the way down to 1%, you will see that it will start playing back staccatissimo. Next to that, the random knob will set the amount for the random note lengths that will be played back. So let's try that. The velocity knob will control the velocity all the way to the right at 100%. That will retain the original recorded velocities and play back as it is on the sequencer. And then all the way to the left, it ignores everything and all is played at the same velocity. And if you go all the way to 0, which it says fix, you can actually choose what velocity the notes will be played back by setting the number on this little box. So let's say I want them to be played back at 110. And random, let's go here again. And random, as before, it will use random velocities based on the percentage you set here. Now you can also click on the random knob to make it a crescendo knob up here. The way this works is to set on the velocity, the starting point of the velocity here, and then on the crescendo, the goal velocity that you want. For example, let's say that I want a velocity of 20, so I'll set that to 20. And then let's say we want to go all the way up to 127, so all the way up. I know it says 126, but it's 127 values because it's also counting 0 as a value. So it is, as we have discussed in the MIDI videos, 127 values. Now, if I play it back, it will start from 20 and then it will go all the way up to 126. Or less. And of course, I can do a decrescendo. I just have to do the opposite. So I will set up my velocity to a higher number. So let's go all the way up to 127. And then for a decrescendo, we need negative values. So I'm going to take that all the way down. Let's do minus 50. And then let's listen to it. Nice. Let's move on to the next one. Let's take that down. Let's do 80. Now, next one, swing. This will add swing to the playback. 50% swing is as played. So to make it a shuffle, you need to take it up, for example, to 66%. And if you go crazy and put it all the way up to 99%, the notes will be so close together that it will sound that they're almost playing together. Alright, let's take it down. Let's go up to 0 again. And let's take that down to 50%. Now the last option here in this tab is the cycle length. Now all the way to the left by grid, that will match the arpeggio length that you have to Logic's division setting. And in this case, as we have it, it will not sound any different. You then get options from 1 all the way up to 32, essentially setting the arpeggio length for the note numbers that we want. For example, if I put it down to 1, you will see that it will only keep the very first note of the chord. And I can just keep adding notes, so if I go all the way up to 2, it will add the second note as well. And if I go to 5, it will obviously have to repeat the first note to play 5 steps. Now all the way to the right, the length of the arpeggio will be determined by the notes as you played them. So let's switch over to the keyboard and see what we've got. So for input snap, this option, when it's set to link to rate, will snap the first note of the arpeggio to a position when you're playing live based on the rate. It will essentially quantize the start point of the arpeggio, and the notes that you play will snap the closest grid position. And if you don't want that, you can simply change it to none. Next we have key. This will snap the notes to their nearest in-scale note. So right now we've got a D minor 7. So all of these notes are part of the C major scale. They fit the C major scale. So if I change the scale to something else, the notes that are not part of it will have to snap their nearest note of that scale. For example, let's see, D major. This one has 2 sharps, F and C. So in our chord here, we've got F and C natural. So if I change that to D, then it will have to move these notes to the closest notes of D major. So in this case, E and B. So let's actually try that and change it to that. And for scale, we can choose what type of scale we want. We want major or Lydian, Mixolydian. You get some options. You get some options here. And the last option in this tab is the keyboard split, which will split the keyboard into 3 zones. So if I enable it, we get the remote zone, which is the blue selection, which allows us to trigger all the parameters we have looked at just by using our keyboard. To see these parameters, you need to click on this magnifying glass here. And then the arpeggio note is the bright orange, which will play back the notes within that zone. So if you have a note that is outside that zone, it will not be included into the arpeggio. And the last zone is the through zone, which allows notes to be played back unprocessed, so regular live keyboard playing. So as you can see, it has an 88 keyboard and a default selection of zones when you open the keyboard split. You can adjust everything. So let's take the arpeggio. Actually, I think my nose load here is F, so I'm going to make this zone from F until B. I'm going here. So I'm going to, I can actually grab and move it to map it exactly as I want. So I'm going to put it on F. That's good. And let's do up. Let's do up and down here. And let's do down here. Random, let's put an octave in as well. Now let's go back. So that will be my remote zone, my arpeggio. I want to start Let's start from C all the way up to B, and I will leave the rest as they are. So I've got an octave here that I can actually play. Let's go to the remote, and I can press F to start it. I can press A to change it to the random, or A sharp for the up and down. I can add an octave, and I can play the area, the through zone area. I can stop it again by pressing G. Now the last tab here is the controller. This allows you to assign up to 4 MIDI controllers to Arpeggiator parameters. Since I have my MIDI keyboard here, let's assign something to the mod wheel. Now the default setting, as you will see, for the destination is Latch. So let's select mod wheel from the list. So all the way up, 1, MIDI CC 1. That is our mod wheel. And right now, when I move it all the way up, it will turn Latch on. So let's try it. And when I move it all the way down, it will deactivate it. So let's look at something else. Let's go with note length random at the destination, and I will leave the MIDI thing on. And now let's move the options tab so that you can see if I take my mod wheel all the way up, the random knob goes up, and all the way down. So I can simply control the knob with my mod wheel. Or you can have 2 options linked to one MIDI controller. So let's go back to the controller, and let's go for this one. Let's do again mod wheel, and this one let's do note length. So if I go to options now, you can see that with just the mod wheel, I can control both of these knobs here. And if it plays back, and let's go back. And since this is MIDI, you can assign it to any MIDI controller that you have. So if you don't know what you choose from the list, you can simply select the Learn MIDI option and then touch the button or knob of the MIDI controller, and it will be automatically assigned to it. For example, Learn MIDI, and then I click my mod wheel and it changes the mod wheel. And that is everything about the Arpeggiator in Logic Pro. It's very, very powerful, and you can have lots of fun and experiment with it. Until the next one.